before we start, I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
You ever tried ostrich before?
No. I think I've kept my main sources of meat income or protein from, like, the three basic pig, cow, and chicken.
Okay.
No, I never had horse.
Okay, that's
let alone
good.
Ostrich. What kind of question is that?
Just don't worry about it.
Okay.
All right, so, I was thinking about the other day that when you were going to Stout, because you graduated last year.
That's right.
So every year in February, we would Skype on the Sunday of, like, the Academy Awards.
Uh-huh. Did we do that last year? Did we do that?
No, we didn't do it last
February?
year. We didn't do it last year.
What was wrong with that?
I was working, I think.
Oh, yeah, at the time.
And I didn't really care for anything that came out last year.
Sure.
But basically, I was always thinking about, like, every single year, like, me, you, and then Brian, sometimes we'd Skype, and then, like, the funniest part would be, like, either you were behind or I was behind.
Yeah.
And so, like, one of us would have a reaction before the actual award was announced.
That's right.
And
you would always say, like, you would pick the one that was, like, not the one that any of us wanted to win, and you'd be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe!"
Yeah, and I was like 30 for 30 on awards. Well, I don't even know. I don't think there's 30
the year
awards.
2016 was the year Mad Max came out. For whatever that following season was, you kept saying that you were 30 for 30, or however many you were up to. You were dead. You had maybe 2 out of the ones that any of us picked. I was doing really good that night, but I didn't write down a score sheet, and you just kept making up a score sheet like, all right, 10 for 10, baby.
But yeah, I was just thinking
kept writing out fake tweets. It was so stupid.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking about the other day, and I was reading an article online. I think it was from, like, the Hollywood Reporter or Vanity Fair or something like that.
You were reading a Vanity Fair article?
No, I just saw it on Twitter. But basically, they were questioning if there's a problem with sexism during award season. Now, the Golden Globe nominations just came out, and I'm going to ignore SAG just because that's more acting. And then there's the PGA, which is the Producers Guild Awards as well.
Wait, which one's the Hollywood Foreign Press? Is that Golden Globe or is that SAG?
I want to say that's SAG.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure. But the Golden Globe Awards came out. Like, we're going to disregard actors because that's something that women are nominated for every year, right?
Yeah, it's a definitive
But, like,
category.
from behind the scenes, like, director, screenwriter, producer.
Right. Non-sex-based category.
Yeah, right, exactly. And honestly, I think there might be women in general nominated every year, at least for producer, just because it's always based on a giant, company, and there's always,
women run stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it was way different than it used to be. So.
Exactly. But when it comes to behind the camera kind of stuff, like, especially with directing, I feel like there is a problem. I think the last person to be nominated was 2017, and it was Greta Gerwig for Lady Bird, which I really enjoyed that movie that year. But I think the main issue is that a lot of these films just go overlooked, and I don't understand, like, the whole thing with, like, actual release dates and, like, what is considered for award considerations at that time. So, like, okay, same director, Greta Gerwig, she just had a movie come out called Little Women. Now, it doesn't have a wide release until Christmas.
Right.
But the critics have already seen it. Like, critics have already seen it. And that...
The people who should be nominating things reasonably ahead of time.
Exactly. And it's getting, like, super good reviews, and literally... At the Golden Globes, it didn't have a single review. It didn't have a single nomination, excuse me.
Little Women, is that a remake
it's
of
a remake.
Previous movie, or is it just based on a
It's
book?
another reinterpretation.
I just know the title.
Yeah. And it had no nominations. I think there was another one for, like, Booksmart. I want to look... Painting of a Woman on Fire is a French film. I don't think that was nominated for anything behind the scenes either. I feel like there might be a problem now. You can always say, like, Martin Scorsese took, years to win Best Director. He didn't win until 2006, and he directed Goodfellas and stuff like that. But the problem with it is if you look back in 2008, during that Academy Award season, and I know we're talking about the Golden Globes, but for director specifically, Catherine Bigelow, she's the first woman ever to win Best Director at the Academy Awards, and she won it at the Golden Globes.
When was
and that was for The Hurt Locker.
That's right.
And the awards, it would have been a film that came out in 2008, and then actually the awards are always in 2009.
Right.
So, like, the Golden Globe Awards aren't until January.
Sure.
But the nominations come out in December.
Sure.
And that's the same with the SAG. I just think that there might be a problem. I don't know if there's anything else behind this, but what do you think about that?
I think I can't speak on it objectively because I haven't seen a whole lot of films in general, as well as the more niche. I wouldn't even say they're niche, but they're like marketed films. They're more close knit, like a Booksmart or the one that Ava DuVernay. I know she put out on Netflix about the guys who were accused of rape in that park. That's one I know about because it gets coverage for being a diverse film that gets a lot of critical acclaim, and it gets put out in a market where a lot of people get access to it, and a lot of people can respond and interact with it. But I'd say that it's still these big movies are never plotted as tentpole films. Like, I don't mean the stuff that we get now with like Harry Potter or the Marvel movies and Star Wars and stuff. They're not lauded by big critical audiences, and a lot of that stuff isn't even given to women. If I had to think of one person who's kind of stood out as like a tentpole female director, it'd probably be Patty Jenkins. But it's only because she's gotten the past two Wonder Woman films, and those are big budget, and they expect a lot of people to
Yeah,
see
they're pretty good too.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
at least the first one is. The next one will come out soon. So,
but I wouldn't say that these films are being marketed big enough for me to say that, like, oh, these things are open to everyone. Why aren't these voters seeing? Or, I take that back. Voters should be seeing this sort of stuff, but I can understand why a critical reception might be different come award season, because a lot of the audience of like the general public won't know what Little Women is, or is that?
Yeah, Little Women.
I almost said Pretty Women. Little Women, because they may not have heard that being a thing earlier on.
Sure. I know. I just pulled up an article from Vanity Fair, and speaking of 2016, because that's when you said the last time you'd watched, like a lot of films. Mm-hmm. This article comes from Vanity Fair again. In its 88-year history, there's only been... Okay, so this is before Greta Gerwig was nominated in 2017 for Lady Bird. Sure. So there had been 5, and it's 89. But in the article, Catherine Bigelow was only one of 4 women only nominated for Best Director ever. And the one before that was in 2004 was Sofia Coppola for Lost in Translation. Mm-hmm. And then before that, it was 1994. And then even before that, it was 1977. Which are just huge gaps when it comes to when it comes to like, well, at least 2004 to 2010 isn't like a giant gap, but 94 to 77 is a pretty big jump.
And considering how long the award season had been going on by that point. What was that? Late 70s? When was that? Or early 74?
That was 77. Was like the first time
tail end of the decade, and you finally have.
And the first Oscar show was in the 30s. So it's like, think about that. That's like 47 years, and times change over time, and stuff like that happens.
40, not 50. Yeah, you're right.
I think even if we were to go off of this, if we want to keep it specific, I do think there is a problem with like sexism in Hollywood in general. Not even during award season. I mean, just think about it. Like, how many people did you see online like just be so toxic about? I guess this is just even about movies in general. So toxic about Captain Marvel, like when that was coming out. Like in general, like toxic to Brie Larson and toxic towards that movie.
Well, I'd like to state to your original question, by the way, just to wrap that up. I think that there's not sexism in the marketplace. Like the people who are going to see movies aren't not seeing movies because they're because they've got certain characters or they've got certain subjects they want to deal with. They're not excluding that. I would say there probably is an issue with the people that are supposed to be in charge of the distribution of awards. There's a lot of old people, a lot of older, more Caucasian folks in those award season type things. I'm pretty certain that Hollywood Foreign Press is the Golden Globes, which again is a collection of people outside of the general Hollywood scope who go for the bigger names, who go and see like the general films of like whatever Hollywood's putting out. That's one of those things I can't exactly say I agree with in terms of an award season, because it seems to be a busted system. But to move back onto this Captain Marvel thing, I get that there's a strong community of fans and stuff that have certain opinions about certain characters. But, you know, I didn't go into that movie thinking there was going to be anything bad about it. Then our friend, your brother, Nate, was telling me all these things about, like, the divisions between the fans and how Brie Larson was acting during the press junket. And it all sounded weird to me. It didn't affect my opinion on the movie. I didn't like the movie that much. I just thought it was whatever. But I don't put that on her. I mean, you as any actor, or, you know, I'm not even saying she was the weak point of the film. I just didn't enjoy it. But, like, you never put that on particular people just because they star in big movies. But when you have certain kinds of statements being made, like, you know, chalked up to whatever it is about, like, sexism or, you know, angry nerds online, I always kind of get weirded out by that because it doesn't seem like the right approach to discuss that sort of stuff in. But you're absolutely right when it comes to the level of toxicity people have had towards, whether we're talking about films like Last Jedi, you know, Kelly Marie Tran, just got obliterated offline.
Yeah, let me say something about that really quick.
Whether it's 2016 Ghostbusters with Leslie Jones and all that. I don't know.
Here's the thing. Star Wars, The Last Jedi is just...
Mitch and I
in my opinion...
We're not fans of The Last Jedi.
It's like, in my opinion, she makes the movie give me... Let me repeat myself.
It's an ulcer. It's an ulcer in my gut, I get.
She is the worst part about that movie, and it's not even her fault.
I just think she's not good in that movie, and I don't think that character is good for that movie. But I have no ill will towards her. And everyone else, well, not everybody else. The people who seem to love The Last Jedi love Kelly Marie Tran. People who, for the most part, I think we are actually in the vocal minority. People who hate The Last Jedi or don't like it hate her as a person, and I don't understand that mentality.
Yeah, I don't understand that. It's not even, honestly, it's not even her fault. It's Rian Johnson's fault. The dialogue is just terrible. It makes me sit and cringe whenever I bought The Force Awakens when it came out, and, you know, you can say whatever about nostalgia or whatever. I'm not even that big of a Star Wars fan, and you can attest to that. You're a bigger Star Wars fan than I am, but I really enjoyed The Force Awakens. I did. I liked it a lot.
I don't think it's perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
But it could have... Well, to get it back to the award season, it's not like that kind of movie is brought into the seasonal award. I mean, Star Wars won a bunch of, like, the original stuff. Those were all special effects, but never, like, writing, never, like, directing or anything.
Right,
like that.
exactly. And, you know, they were talking about that when The Force Awakens came out. They're like, oh, this could be... It could be nominated for Best Picture.
Because everyone was basing it off of Rian Johnson's credibility as a writer and a filmmaker, which up to that point, in my opinion, I haven't seen Knives Out yet, but I hear that's great too.
Yeah,
has been nothing but, you know, accolades. So, you know, I think that comes down to a case by case thing with a director and a writer in a previous already existing franchise, of course. But Star Wars right now, I don't think, in its current state anyway, is a franchise that's even worried about not getting awards because, you know, it's Star Wars. It's old. It's weird.
Yeah, I think that, especially with Star Wars at this point, they were probably smart to go back to J.J. Abrams just because, you know, people were so toxic about The Last Jedi, especially towards, you know, towards the Rose character. I don't know the actress's name. What's her name?
Kelly Marie Tran.
Kelly Marie Tran. But no one's like that towards Daisy Ridley. So I don't know.
Oh, people complain. Yeah, you're right. People complain about the lack of creativity at Disney. They complain about if people don't like Rey as a character, which in certain aspects I don't either. Because they claim, you know, like there's no personality, or there was that whole debate after The Force Awakens, Mary Sue-isms and all that. But people never really came hard at Daisy Ridley for any of that. Like, they were always, you know, they're like, well, she's just an actor. But Kelly Marie Tran, it's either people are really fierce about that particular character, which again, I agree, was bad. But for it to warrant a change in opinion of how we treat people online that heavily, I think it's kind of an interesting notion to note.
Right. You bring up an interesting point about like having no depth in character, and especially since we're on the point of sexism. My favorite director is Tarantino, which something you said kind of sparked this thought. Tarantino.
Who?
Tarantino.
Who?
Shut up. But anyway, there's a thing about him, and people think that he's actually a very sexist person.
Sexist, racist, yeah.
Yeah. I think the problem with that statement is,
Do you reject that hypothesis, Mitchell?
What do you mean?
Do you reject that hypothesis?
I don't. The thing about it is what people claim about his movies is that women are taking more severe beatings than men. So let's say, okay, we never talked about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, like we said we were going to. So, like in that movie, at the end, spoiler alert, the women get hurt.
The Charlie Manson.
Yeah, followers. The Charles Manson, the two women from the Charles Manson clan that go to kill Sharon Tate end up going to Rick Dalton's house.
Who suffers no violence minus the massacre that is her humility at the hands of Tarantino's foot fetish. Her feet get shown off a lot.
Yeah, and that's a whole different topic.
That's a whole other thing about Quentin Tarantino.
Even talking about that, like, she gets her face just beaten with like literally he throws the
dog food?
hefty can of dog food, and her face just like implodes, and her teeth get spit out, and
what's her face? She gets like American history X'd onto the mantelpiece over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. He just smashes her face like repeatedly into like the fireplace, the corner of the edge of the fireplace.
It's a very visceral,
and it's
piece of violence.
Visceral and brutal, and like that whole part is supposed to be. It's not even supposed to be. It's supposed to be brutal, but it's not supposed to be serious. It's supposed to be taken lightheartedly.
Yeah, that's the
in the moment. If you
it.
watch the movie and you actually know the background of of what was actually about to happen on that night, and then like the other girl gets set on fire by a flamethrower, and it's like,
and it's done as like a big hurrah, like everything, all pieces of come together. The roundabout little piece of knowledge you gained earlier that we're in a movie discussion now.
Tarantino likes doing movies about like the damsel in distress, and people kind of turned off by that now. Sure. Like especially with like Kill Bill. I mean, she's her own like hero though in that movie, but she still is that kind of damsel in distress where like she's literally destroyed at the beginning of the movie, and then she comes back for revenge.
So do you think, to pose you a question, do you think it's a problem that movies like Tarantino that he's making in 2019 are being the films that are being represented at the Oscars or the Golden Globes?
Yeah, and that's interesting you bring that up, because that movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, not Kill Bill, excuse me, but the movie we were just previously talking about with the murder is nominated for Best Picture. It's nominated for Best Director. It's nominated for Best Original Screenplay. And it's just kind of, they correlate, but they don't correlate at the same time.
Do you think that's a bigger issue of, these kind of films are kind of an old style of thinking? Or do you think there's people still in the award season, the award panel, that have an old sensibility of thinking?
Oh, yeah, there's definitely old sensibility just sitting in there. With the Academy, it's a lot of... there is a younger crowd, and they have become more diverse as a group. I remember reading an article, I want to say it was from 2 years ago, that there was like barely anyone that wasn't like white on the actual part of the actual Academy nominating stuff and actually voting stuff for the award season.
Hashtag Oscars so white.
Yeah, exactly. That, and there was lack of diversity with the nominations and within the Academy itself. And that's a whole nother story by itself.
But didn't they need to correct things about that? Didn't the president come out of the guild, the Academy Award Guild, and didn't she want to change things about it? Or
yeah.
Well, they didn't come to fruition, right? Because they were everyone was rejected the notion.
And then they were.
What were they planning? I forget.
I don't remember, but I think the biggest problem with that is that they made it even worse by, they are trying to create all this diversity with the Oscars, and then last year they're like, oh, let's do most popular movie.
Yeah,
That was it. And then it's no, why are you're just doing that because Black Panther is this giant film that's bringing another culture together, and that's fine. No one's arguing with that. But you don't just give it an award nomination just because it's so popular. Watch the actual movie. If you read a lot of the critics' reviews, they're not even really talking about the movie in general. They're just talking about its cultural impact. And that's great, that's great.
Is it great?
But is the movie actually great,
Is it great, or are we saying okay, it's fine, but it's not real objective film criticism? What do you think about that? Are we as a society saying, fine, you can have your little movie, it's cultural minorities, you can have your little movie, but it's not a real film.
Right.
It's not a real film contention.
That's almost what they were doing. You know what I mean? When they were going to do that most popular film category at the Oscars. It's what's the point?
But
what's the point now? You're just doing that.
Do you think that's as bad of a thing for them to raise a movie status that isn't a fine movie, but it's not maybe what we would consider Oscar worthy? But do you think that's as bad as us saying well, the movie that we don't necessarily like isn't Oscar worthy because it doesn't follow the credentials of what we think is a traditional Oscar film?
I guess it's many things are subjective and objective. I think when you're doing something like this, and with how prestigious people find the actual Academy Awards ceremony and stuff like that, you just don't mess with that kind of stuff, and you need to think about it objectively and not subjectively. Because once you start thinking subjectively, then it might get all distraught, especially when you're in a group of there's probably over 100 people in the Academy. I mean, I can just look it up right now. I don't know off the top of my head.
Well, I'm not going to say that I've been an Oscar poo-pooer for a long time now, but I've understood that there's been the discourse between Academy voters being maybe not the demographic that a lot of people want them to fit, whether they are too old or if they are from old money and they come from they all share the same background. So, but I will say that the Oscars have kind of, in award season in general, have kind of given me a sense of okay, well, not all the stuff is that important. Since I saw Green Mill win Best Picture last year.
Green Book, thank you. Green Mill's a restaurant.
Green Mill's a delicious pizza joint. And I would not be upset if they got the Oscar.
So I'm reading that there's about 8,000 members, and that includes people from, producers, directors, screenwriters, actors, actresses, costume designers, all that kind of stuff. And so I think, you don't want to be biased, but when it comes to actually nominating films of quality, you have to think objectively and not subjectively. And I think it had nothing to do with the people who are nominating it, but it had to do with the nominations themselves and what was actually written. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think that's also a big problem as well. But they're trying to fix it. I mean, I was just reading an article and it says that they just added. This is of July 1st. They just added 842 new members. And this is from actors, directors, writers. And I think it's getting really big, but I think a lot of those are still very, old money Hollywood people. Mm-hmm. Sure. I'm not entirely sure because it's not like there's going to be a list of everyone who's a part of the Academy and who's responsible for writing nominations down.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And I guess It's just like me and you thinking, what's the best movie of the year? Well, it's going to be subjective between the two of us. But when it comes to something like that, you got to think objectively. You can't just be like, okay, this needs to be this. Everyone can't be subjective. You must be objective. There's an objective. What's the best movie of the year? I understand you're all thinking subjectively, but then I guess it just defeats the point. I guess I'm contradicting myself at this point.
A little bit there, but I do think, getting back to the season that we're going to have started next year, we're probably going to see a lot of Oscar reflections in the Golden Globes. And if that's the case, probably not going to see movies like Booksmart, which was one movie I did see this year, which was great.
Well, Booksmart?
Booksmart was so good.
Yeah.
And I think that's a darn shame for the... I don't want to say darn shame like, aw, shucks. But it is an upsetting factoid that, you know, a movie like that is going to be... Well, but you know what? I'll say I get upset every year by movies that weren't as heavily contested or brought into the light because of the Oscars, whether it's like a Nightcrawler or in Eighth Grade, because those movies don't reflect on any part regarding sex or anything. Well, that's not the way I look at it. Bo Burnham directed Eighth Grade. He's a guy that stars a female lead. Nightcrawler, I don't think... Who directed Nightcrawler?
No, that was a guy.
That was a guy, sure, but that's a guy on a guy picture. Booksmart was directed by a female, has plenty of female leads in it. It's a great movie. I think people need to consider that there's an issue with the system and not so much... Well, I guess that's what people are complaining about, the system more than anything else, right?
I'm reading an article, and this is one from last year. Award season noms lacking again for women behind the camera. This is even from last year, and I don't know if this is a consistent thing because I just seen the other one the other day. This isn't the same article, but especially with like, well, let's see, Rachel Morrison. Like even with cinematography and stuff like, especially cinematography, visual effects. Let me see here. Only 3 women have ever been nominated for special effects. There's a WGA. Only of the 20 feature film writers nominated from 2018 for the 2019 awards, only 1 is female. And I don't even believe that they were nominated. Again, it says only 5 females have been nominated for Best Director, and only 1 has won. And only 1 female cinematographer has been nominated for an Oscar, and that was just last year when Rachel Morrison was nominated for lensing Netflix's Mudbound, which I watched a little bit of, and that was actually a really good-looking movie, really gritty and dirty, but it was good, though.
I would just say, again, that statistic-wise, if you're going to look at it statistically, then absolutely there's a discrepancy between the amount, especially, you know, this year in particular is why people are really bringing this one up with regards to sexism. But if you're going to look at it numbers-wise, then you're never going to be able to see as to why it's an issue. I'm not saying it's good issues. I think you need to solve those issues. But if you look at it statistically every year, you're going to find markets that aren't being addressed. You're going to find movies where there was a more, you know, Hispanic filmmakers or Asian filmmakers or gay filmmakers. You're going to have discrepancies year to year with the amount of people that aren't represented, at least behind the camera, like you said. But as long as there's being a kind of, as long as there's a good mix of different genres and different filmmakers, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. As long as we go ahead and fix this issue. I do think that there has been a long-standing issue of Academy Award members that hopefully is being resolved by like the amount of people that you just said were brought in.
Right.
You know, who's to say that'll solve anything by the time of next year, or what films we'll even be seeing next year. I think we're living in a good we're living in a golden valley of different film crops. There's a lot of places you can go to see any kind of movie you want to see in this day and age, and it's not back alley market niche type stuff. It's kind of front and center for the most part. There may not be the exact big market female directors at this time and place, but I think we'll be seeing that pretty soon.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have nothing left to talk about. What about you?
I would say go see Booksmart if you haven't. That was my recommendation of the year. It's one of 3 movies I saw, and I need to go catch up on movies.
Yeah. It was nice talking to you.
Who am I again? My name is Nick, by the way. I never said my name. Mitch never introduced me. He's a bad host.